to be ready. Great. And then Nathaniel, do you like being called Nate? Or do you like it when it's Nathaniel? Yeah, Nate. Okay, cool. I can do that. Although I do love that name. So I do love the name Nathaniel, but Nate it is. All right. So let's go ahead. That's how I feel about my name. My full name is Alexandra. And I'm like, call me Allie. I don't like the name Alexandra. So I understand. Long names can be challenging at times. All right, so let me know when the rest of you are ready and we will move on. I'm going to go ahead and click over a little bit. So remembering that the goals of our lesson is to recover information from a crime scene that involves understanding arson and explosion and then applying that reconstruction techniques to figure out if it's a fire-based crime. We're going to look at biological characteristics of victims in the fire versus non-victims, and then apply data to interpret the validity of a suspect's case. Oh my gosh, this thing is very tricky. So on slide, once you click through the introduction slide, that's where you're going to get all of your material links. So you're going to want to click on the student guide lesson 8 and the arson laboratory evidence pack, the lab guidelines, and then the lab instructions for arson. Okay, so those are all of the things you're going to want to open. So let me know when you guys got that and we will be ready to move on. Yes. Yay. Good to go, Courtney. Yes, love it. That's okay. No rush. Awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So when we are doing this lesson, let's click through the slides and then we'll kind of go through the slides and then go back to the actual lab. So when we're clicking through, we want to know the scene, right? So understanding, I'm not going to read through all of this, but setting the scene, there was a fire in a strip mall that was of a furniture store. And there were some bodies that were found in this fire. One was a female that was in the front showroom, and there was a male in the central office. And one of them was identified as the shop's owner and his wife. This is very dark. I forget how dark this class can be, but at the same time, very cool. It's very contradicting feelings for me. Okay, investigators photographed the scene and sampled many areas of the workshop, including the chemical storage cabinets, office, showroom, and connecting corridor. They also interviewed and took away some interview questions from some of the coworkers. So we are the fire and arson investigators. So we are going to try to figure out whether this was arson or if it was a mistake. So a couple things that we want to know. What caused the fire? What was the origin of the fire? What was the fire's path from the origin? How did the victims die? And was the fire accident or arson? Right? So as we're getting more and more information and direction, we're going to start to learn a little bit more in terms of okay, so a couple of things that we want to pay attention to. We want to pay attention to the direction of the origin of the fire. So when we have something like different patterns, remember that different patterns can really help determine and tell us a story of what happened with the patterns or with the fire itself. So we've got these things called inverted cones. So that is when we get this triangle pattern with broad bases. This means that the flame there was often caused by flammable liquids spread out on the floor. We have a V pattern formed by fires burning upward. So the point of the V points directly to the fire's origin. We've got U patterns. It's like a V, but it indicates that the place of origin of the fire is farther from the wall. We have any floor damage means that the floor is the origin, so we would expect to see heavy char. We also have heat shadows in protected areas. That means that there was some sort of block from that heat transfer to an area. There was a block between that and left a shadow. And then we also have ignitable liquid pour patterns. So several trails of severely burned material indicating the flow of an accelerant and or path. So this is just some background information because we're going to start to look at some of these patterns. We also know that there is this sample. So what some forensic scientists will do is they'll actually take some materials that are found in the ground, in the carpet, and they'll put it into this chamber. So in this chamber, there is this charcoal paper. So we think of charcoal as something that we burn to get energy, but we're also starting to realize that things like charcoal filters and charcoal toothbrushes, it's become this like really big thing because we realize that it's a really good filter. It absorbs a lot of things. And so we use this as a way that when we start to heat up the evidence, the different pieces of residue, we can heat it up and we use this charcoal paper filter to absorb any of those chemicals. And we can actually look at a high concentration of those vapors, of any chemicals, and we can use that filter to absorb it as a way to then test the paper and determine what those concentration, what those vapors, what those chemicals are, and determine what was actually present in that fire. And we've got an airtight lid so that none of the vapors can escape. So these are different ways. We call this a headspace sampling, and it can actually reveal a lot of things that may accelerate a fire. So we can use that to determine any information that was maybe present that maybe helped the fire, which then is an indicator of arson. Then when we're taking a look at fire victims, we can take a look at their lung capacity and their concentration in their blood samples to determine the amounts of carbon monoxide inhaled. Carbon monoxide, remember, is a poison. And so when it gets breathed into our lungs at the site of exchange, we can start to see whether or not, or what the levels of carbon monoxide was. And that's going to tell us what the cause of death was. And that's going to provide us some information about death in general. So that is the introduction. That's like the basics. And so if you haven't gone through the arson lesson to begin with, then this is going to be a great place to start with some background information. So in the evidence pack that you all just download, we're going to have some crime scene notes, the scene photographs, and then notes from the medical examiner. So you're going to take a look at the laboratory instructions and complete this lab. So go to the next screen to access the gas chromatograms for this lab. So let's go ahead and take a look at the instructions first before we move on to the next scene. So I've got the instructions here. I'm going to move it over to our screen so we can take a look at what they are. Let me go ahead and zoom in. Now you should have this printed out in front of you, or at least out in front of you in your screen. But if you don't, I will have it here for you as well. All right, so we've got our laboratory materials, student guide, laboratory guidelines, evidence pack, and then the gas chromatograms is online. You'll need a scientific calculator, maybe. And so we've got our summary. Like we just said, we have the fire in the furniture store. The two bodies that were discovered were Sam, which is the shop owner, and his wife, Marie. And then they were sent to the medical examiner's office for an autopsy, waiting for that report to determine whether it was an accident or if it was actually arson and murder. So we are going to take a look at the scene, the photographs. We're going to look at the sampled areas, the chemical storage. We're going to take a look at some interview and learn a little bit more about this. So the part one, we're going to read the account of the crime scene and the crime scene notes, which are in the evidence pack. And then in this space below, you're going to record any details that may indicate whether this was fire or not. So What we're going to do is we are going to open up that evidence pack. So let's take a look. I have it here. You guys should have it open on yours as well. And I'm going to put the evidence pack up front as well. Now, I know this sounds like really elementary, but I'm going to actually have people take turns reading this out loud. So we do have a couple of paragraphs. So we're going to do a little popcorn action. So if do I have a volunteer who would like to read a couple of paragraphs out loud for everyone? If not, I will. All right, Elena, love it. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and take yourself off of mute, and that's fine, Courtney.
We start at crime scene notes, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Firefighters responded to a 911 emergency call at a business in a strip mall on W Main Street at 9:15 p.m. On March 4th, the business Brown Brothers Furniture Repair and Refinishing was burning. Firefighters from 3 companies extinguished the blaze within 30 minutes. When the fire was extinguished, the incident commander notified the owners at 9:45 p.m. Robert Brown, age 45, arrived at 10 p.m. James Brown, age 25, arrived at 10:15 p.m. However, Samuel Brown, age 33, could not be reached. Fire investigators entered the building through the front door into the showroom at 10 p.m. when the incident commander confirmed that it was safe to do so. The incident commander reported that there was a body of a female victim inside the showroom near the entrance to the corridor leading to the back of the storeroom, or the north side. There was a male victim in the office, which opened from the east. Should I continue?
Up to you. Feel free to popcorn it off. I know
Okay.
Courtney said her mic was acting weird, however.
Okay. The female victim was lying face down on the burned carpet. Her head was facing the corridor. She was clad in a dress that was partially burned. She had burns on her arms, legs, scalp, and back. It was estimated that burns covered 40% of the body, mostly on the back portions. The male victim was lying face down in the office. His head was facing the desk in the rear of the office west side. He was wearing a partially burned suit. His body was burned in a similar manner of that of the female victim, but his burns covered 60 to 70% of his body. He was laying on an area of carpet that appeared to have been saturated with liquid. The investigators noted an organic smell about the liquid. The same smell was apparent on the victim's clothes. They also noticed rainbow patterns on a puddle of water that extinguished the flames. Furthermore, investigators found a heavy broken glass paperweight under the charred remains of the desk. One of the filing cabinet's drawers was open. Most of the documents were burned, but some charred pieces were inside. The undersides of the file drawers and desk appeared to be more heavily burned than the top surfaces. The investigators photographed the burned remains of the entire store. They photographed the office and the showroom. Popcorn.
Anyone want to pick up? Caroline, Nate?
I can.
Great, thanks.
Sorry, which one did we pick up on? I lost my place. The coroner's assistant?
Yep.
Okay. The coroner's assistants initially examined the bodies at the scene. As the coroner's assistants were removing the bodies of the victims, they asked the owners present, Robert and James, if they could identify the bodies. Both positively identified the victims as their brother Samuel and his wife, Marie, age 30. The attendants informed the brothers that the victims would be autopsied before being released to the family for burial. Interviews with the firefighters indicated that the flames were bright orange with lots of heavy black smoke. Both the front and rear doors were unlocked. None of the smoke detectors had batteries in them. The building itself was not equipped with a fire sprinkler system or any type of burglar alarm. In the chemical storage closet, there were several empty cans in addition to the other products used by the shop. Police and fire investigators interviewed the owners. Robert Brown had been at home watching a basketball game on TV. His wife and children were visiting relatives out of town. James Brown went to a movie in a local theater at 8 p.m. The theater did not let out until geez, I'm sorry, 10 p.m. He handed a detective a torn ticket stub. The detective noticed that he had a burn on his right hand and some bruises on his face. James Brown told him that he had slipped in the kitchen while cooking earlier in the evening. During the fall, he hit his face and burned his hand. Detectives took swabs of the hands of both men for evidence processing. Later investigations of the business's financial records indicated that it had financial problems. It owed overdue rent payments and had not paid bills submitted by several supply companies. The business was insured by NC Life and Casualty for $2 million. The insurance company was sending its own investigators to the scene.
Okay, so we have quite the predicament on our hands. My goodness. So we just had a chance to read the notes. The notes from the medical examiner said that, well, hold on, let's go ahead and go back to our instructions to make sure. Great. So we went ahead in the space below, record any details that may indicate whether or not this fire was arson. So before we start to go into the second part, it looks like that part one, you should just start typing underneath it, because to me, it looks like that was supposed to be the space. I'm trying to see if there's anywhere else, but right away, what are some things that caught our attention? What are some things that were right? Like Courtney said, sus, right? What is suspicious about the whole situation? What might lead you to understanding that this may not necessarily be an easy, simple case as an accident? Elena?
So the first thing I noticed was that they both had 2 out of the 3 owners had burns on the hands. I mean, the ones that were alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that they were struggling with financial records. This is just a theory, but I think that, does it say that they're brothers or if they're just owners?
They're brothers.
So all 3 are brothers.
I believe so.
My theory is that maybe Robert and James wanted to sell the business, but Robert didn't. And so they killed Robert and his wife so that they could be able to sell the business. Or get
Sam.
Oh, Sam, sorry.
That's okay.
So that they could get, liabilities for having something burned down, not be able to be responsible, or, they wouldn't have to deal with fighting with their brother to try and sell the company.
All right, that is theory number 1. Okay, I love it. There you're taking in some of the context, you're looking at some of the fishy clues. Great. I love it. What other things did we notice in those notes that were a little suspicious or could be taken a little, a little wrong, I suppose, for lack of a better word? The guy with burns and bruises, it says he was home. Good. Okay, so we've got, I believe that was James Brown, had bruises and burns on his hand. Okay, but what is something that James Brown has that may indicate that he was telling the truth? Right? So remember that when we're looking at the notes, where is it? Okay. Hold on. Where did it go? That's not what I wanted. Here. So when we're looking at this, remember it said that James Brown went to a movie and he handed a detective a torn ticket stub. So we have some evidence that suggests, now I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, I'm just pointing this out. we have some evidence that suggests that James was at a movie theater. And we have evidence that suggests he was there because we have a ticket stub, right? But what about the other brother? What did they say about Robert?
That he was home alone watching a basketball or whatever game because his wife and kids were out of town.
Okay, so we have Robert, who has no burns, right? He doesn't have any burns. They didn't, at least nothing that they noticed, but was home alone. Anything else seem suspicious? He has no alibi. Yes.
The financial issues could be, a little suspicious.
Good. Yes. In the words of all you young folk, it's sus, right? Rent. Good. There was rent issues, bills were piling up, right? Good. Okay. So let's go into part 2. Sorry, my allergies are like really bugging me, which is why I keep itching. Okay, we're going to take a look at the fires, or excuse me, we're going to take a look at the photographs of the office and the showroom in the evidence pack. And then the numbers on the photographs mark the location of the samples. So you're going to do that in part 2 of this lab. So the first thing that you're going to do is answer these questions. So look at the photo of the office. What type of burn pattern is on the wall? So thinking about whether it's the cone, the V, the U, right? So thinking about those, the notes that we took in the beginning or what we read in the beginning of the lesson, and then answering all of these questions. So let's start off with the photo of the office. So if we take a look at our evidence pack, right, we'll come back to the autopsy. Unless, is this in order? Hold on, let me double check before I don't want to skip anything important. It was in part 1. It just said the crime scene notes. Okay, we will look at the autopsy later on. Okay, so let's take a look at these pictures, right? So we've got our office. So we want to take a look at what is happening when it comes to the different samples and the patterns. So we see that the photograph of the office facing west, the numbers denote where investigators took samples of debris for analysis. So sample 1, they took samples from the carpet. They took samples from the filing cabinet. So let's take a look at this picture. So in answering the question. So the question is asking us, what burn pattern is on the wall? What types of burn patterns are on the floor? And describe the burn patterns on the cabinet. So what do you guys notice? What are some of the burn types on the wall? What do we consider that?
Wouldn't it be V-shaped, like, or U? I mean, it's kind of a upside down V.
Okay. So is there, so it could be a V shape. Does everyone agree? Or, could this be considered a cone shape? I'm not saying any of these are wrong, just throwing out some clarifying questions. I want to get a consensus from all you.
I was thinking the inverted cone.
Okay.
But wait, if a cone normally looks like that, inverted would mean it's upside down, right? I don't know.
What do you think, Courtney? Okay, that's okay. I think it's upside down cone or V. I could see either. Okay, so just to get some ideas, let's see. It to me looks like it might be, I'm looking up just in case. Just want to make sure that we're all doing this correctly. Okay, so these would be considered cone, I believe. I'm just double checking. Yeah. So I'm going to say that they're both pretty similar, but I would say that maybe this is more of a cone shape. Okay. Because if you think of a V, it's going to look more like that upside down triangle. And this one is like that. You guys were all saying it's inverted, right? Yeah. So I would think that maybe this is the cone, right? So maybe we put that down. If you guys, if you guys want to do, if you guys could also say that it is V for now. And then once we see more pictures and we learn more, you can always change it, right? What about the burn patterns on the floor? Do you guys remember what we call that whenever there's like a shadow? Good. Let's see, I can go back to this slide too. Taking a little, there we go. Inverted cone, triangle patterns with broad bases. Yes, so the inverted heat shadows and protected areas show that heat transfer to an area was blocked by an object. Good, so you guys have the shadow correct. Heat shadow, burn shadow, fire shadow is fine. Heat shadow is technically accurate. Floor damage may indicate the floor is the origin, expect heavy char at the point of origin, right? So these are really great. Great. So then when we're talking about that inverted cone, triangle patterns with broad bases often caused by flammable liquids spread out on the floor. So we're starting to see that there may be some repeated patterns that kind of fall in together. Great. Good. So then what about underneath the filing cabinet? What are some patterns that we notice under the filing cabinet? Floor damage and heat shadow is exactly what I would say as well. So let's move my image to the right. Let's have this. Great. Let me get this set up again. Okay, so taking a look at the filing cabinet, right? So what kind of pattern do we see there? Okay, so we have half of it is not burned at all, right? So it's kind of weird. What else? What part of it is burned? The bottom or the top? Just the bottom. So remember that filing cabinets are made up of heavier material, of metal, but it is interesting that it's from the bottoms. That tells us where the fire mostly came from and where it reached. So we know based on the patterns, where do we think that most of the fire started? The floor, yeah. So we can start to see that most of the fire started from the floor. You can tell by the floor damage. And then these inverted cones, right? These inverted cone shadows is also an indicator. Good. Okay, so then let's take a look at our next crime scene photograph. So now we have the showroom, right? So the showroom, and then a couple of things that we wanted to ask about it was the storeroom, excuse me, the show. Is there a different picture for the storeroom? No. So then this should say showroom. Okay. Yes. So now what type of burn pattern is on the wall?
I would say a V, like it's more convincing that it's a V pattern.
Exactly. Yeah, I would too. Yeah, I would definitely say that the pattern on the wall is much more of a V shape. See how the difference there with that shape with the V versus the inverted cone? Good. What about the pattern on the floor?
Wouldn't it be again like heat shadows and floor damage?
Yeah, yep, exactly. And then also take a look at where this is situated, right? We have an arrow facing towards the office. So noticing that the office is going to be over here, and then taking a look, this is the office and this is the door to the showroom, right? So kind of putting some pieces in together about where, right? We're trying to figure out the origin of the fire. So kind of just thinking about that. But you're right, we've got a heat shadow, right? This would be where Maria was. We can even take a look debris from the floor, right? We would think this is kind of where her body was laying. And then what about compare and contrast the burn patterns in the office and the showroom? I don't know why I keep saying storeroom. That's frustrating. So thinking about that, what could possibly have happened? What are some comparisons? Hmm. Okay, so the office is more severe and then it goes into the showroom. There's just no way for a random fire to just start in the office. And then Courtney, you said that it's probably spread from the showroom because its burn pattern started there. Okay, so take a little closer look, Courtney. So let's compare before we start, and Alina, right, and Caroline, before we start making some comparison, let's just, before we start making a theory connecting everything, let's just compare it, right? So what is the burn? Is the burn patterns more severe in the showroom or in the office? Right? The office, right? And then what are some patterns that we notice? We know what's the pattern on the wall versus the showroom and from the office for the wall.
The cone pattern would suggest that well, an accelerant was used. And like it's heavily charred in the office versus the showroom, like half of it's still intact is what it looks like. So it probably started, well, yeah, in the office just because of how charred it is compared to the showroom.
Good. Awesome. And Elena, you also made a great point. The office seems like it was man-made while the showroom seems like a natural fire. And when we're thinking about that, we want to think about those shapes, right? We want to think about how these shapes tell a story. So if we're taking a look at these two different pictures and we're trying to compare the patterns on the wall in the office, for this is the showroom, what are those patterns telling us? So we've got these inverted cones, and according to our lesson, it says that the triangle patterns with broad bases, meaning the base is at the bottom, is often caused by flammable liquids spread out on the floor. So there's more fire kind of coming from the bottom and then kind of pointing upwards, versus a V pattern means that it's formed by the fires burning upward. So the point of the V points directly to the fire's origin. So we're taking a look at this inverted cone in the office. What is that telling us about the origin of the fire versus the V shape, which was telling us of the office, right? Where the origin of the fire started. So I would align with Elena in saying that it seems like this one may have been coming more from the floor in the sense of where it started, versus this is also burning, but seems like the flames are a little bit more natural in the way that it goes up, right? If you have a fire, it starts from one spot and the flames tend to go out. So thinking about that, good, let's go. And so we're comparing the patterns and what those patterns might tell us. So why don't you guys take a second and then answering these questions, and then draw arrows to show the origin and spread of the fire. So thinking about how do you think the fire spread, and then answering based on the photographs, write what you can conclude about the fire so far. So yes, go ahead, Alina.
From like the video that we saw of like a fire spreading, like when it starts from the bottom, it goes upward, and then the flames are kind of upward. If it did like spread from the office to the showroom and like kind of leaked out through the door, wouldn't the flames be more upward at the fire at that point because it's still looking for fuel?
Yes, say that last part again. Wouldn't the
fires from the office's fire be more upward because it had already used all the accelerant in the offices? So when moving into the showroom, the fire would be at the top of the whole.
Interesting. Very interesting. You bring up a really good point. I would think that would be the case as well. Good. So let's write that down. Maybe, we can always our theories always change as we get more information. So we could think, just based on this photographs, what it could be. And then as we learn more information, our theory can change, right? So Elena, you make a great point. I definitely would write that down somewhere and keep that in the back of our minds in case it supports a better story, right? Good. Analyzing. Great. But write it, and so go ahead and finish up answering those questions for part 2 and what you conclude about the fire. And you can even take in Elena's suggestion as to like what happened, right? Great points. All right, let me know when you guys finish answering those 3 and 4, and then we will go into looking at the samples. All right, let me know when you're done. Great. Courtney, Caroline, let me know when you guys are done. No rush, no pressure, just wanting to know. Good. So Courtney, the fire was started on the office floor, probably with an accelerant, then moved to the showroom looking for more fuel, so spread up the walls. Good. That's awesome. I absolutely love the connection that you're making, those patterns, right? Kind of coming up with that story that we were talking about. Great. I love it. Okay, let's go into the third part. So was an accelerant used in the fire? So investigators took samples of burned areas around the store. These are marked by numbers in the photographs. I'm going to open this up so it's a little easier to read. Samples 3 to 6 were taken from empty cans in the storage cabinet in the showroom. Also available were 4 products routinely used with the shop: the Acme lacquer thinner, Woodcraft lacquer thinner, Acme mineral spirits, and Acme turpentine. Swabs of James Brown's and Robert Brown's hands were analyzed. They were labeled as samples 10 and 11. The samples from the burned areas of the store were stored in containers. Charcoal strips were placed in the headspace of the containers to absorb and concentrate any volatile gases within that space. The absorbed material was extracted from the charcoal strips and run on a gas chromatograph. Refer to the photos in the evidence pack. Use the photos to describe the location of each sample in the table below. Then go online to locate the chromatograms of the samples in the lesson, and then click on sample 1 to see the gas chromatogram of that sample. This sample is unknown sample because investigators have not been able to identify it yet. Now click on the known chromatogram of Acme lacquer thinner. Does the chromatogram of sample 1 match the chromatogram of Acme lacquer thinner? If it matches, you know that sample 1 is also Acme lacquer thinner. If it doesn't match, try another sample to see if they match. So then repeat steps 2 for each of the known samples. Record all matches in the table below. So this is going to require a little back and forth, right? So we're going to go through all of the samples. We're going to identify the location and then identify the substance. So this is when we're going to go back to our slides, right? So our slides told us that on the next, once you go through, it's going to show you the different samples. It's going to go through and give you a comparison tool. So you're going to actually analyze and locate where that sample originated from. So we already did this. We printed this out, and here is our sample. So we've got 11 unknown samples. So we're going to go one by one. So the very first one, unknown sample, and then we're going to be comparing the number, right? The number of abundance with the unknown sample to the graphs of the known samples. So when we take a look at our evidence pack, okay, number 1, we first want to locate. So where was our sample, unknown sample 1? Where was that from? The floor office, exactly. Specifically, it's going to be found in what? Sample 1 was also telling us it was from the floor office, which was also made up of, what does it say there? What does that say? Carpet debris, right? So when we go to our evidence in our lab, we're going to type in for location, we're going to do floor office carpet debris. Great. Now we're going to compare it to the graphs. Now, I think we looked at with this first one. So taking a look at the levels and on the Y and on the X, what do we, when we compare it to a known sample, what do we think this sample 1 is of? Is this a match? Yes, right? So we can now determine that unknown sample 1, we go back to our lab, it is Acme lacquer thinner. Yeah? Okay, so let's go ahead and go to sample 2. So sample 2 is what? File cabinet degree, right? And where is it located? In the office, right? Okay, so now let's take a look at our lab. So now we're going to go to sample 2. And what is that going to be? And don't forget, we also have all these other ones. So of these 4, what is it of? Same as 1. Good. Now, why don't we divide and conquer? So now that we have an idea of how this is going to work, why don't we take the remaining 9? Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that includes James Brown's hand, right? So why don't we each take 3? And by each, I mean one of you, each of you guys. So who wants to take sample 3, 4, and 5? Okay, Courtney is going to do 3, 4, and 5. Who would like to do 6, 7, and 8? Elena. And then 9, 10, 11 will be Caroline. Okay, so Elena, if you are done with all the samples, then just hang tight and then let's give it a couple minutes and then we'll go ahead and share. So Courtney, why don't you look at 3, 4, and 5, identify the location, what it is, and the substance. And then Caroline, you'll do that with 9, 10, and 11. Okay. So go ahead and do that. And then once you have it figured out, go ahead and type it into the chat. Don't wait for me to be like, okay, now's the time. Just go ahead and put that info. Elena, feel free to go ahead and put your answers in the chat if you are done.
Do you want the locations too?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so great. Go ahead and start putting in some of that info. And as soon as you're done with yours, take a look at the chat and include our partners, our peers with their info too, right? Great. Great. Good, Courtney. Good. So Courtney has the Acme Mineral Spirits for number 3. Number 4 is the Woodcraft Lacquer Thinner. Number 5 is the Acme Lacquer Thinner. Good. And then Elena said that, good. Number 6 was the Showroom Wood Storage Chest with the Acme Lacquer Thinner. Number 7 was great. I'm loving it. You guys are getting that info out. Great. Caroline's got 9 is the floor debris, and 10 has the James Brown hand, has the Acme lacquer thinner, and Robert Brown's had the Acme turpentine. Good. So we should have all of our info now. We're just waiting on 8. Perfect. So go ahead and fill out that table. And I'll do the same thing on my end, so that way we can all be on the same page. You can take a look at it. So 3 is the Acme Mineral Spirits. 4 is the Woodcraft Lacquer. Oops. 5 is the Acme Lacquer. Great. Did I miss 6? Nope, Elena, you got 6. So 6 was the Showroom Wood Storage Chest that had Acme Lacquer Thinner. 7 was the Showroom Tool, and it had the Acme. And 8 for debris was the Acme Lacquer Thinner. Okay, and nine is the floor debris. Both of these had the Acme Lacquer Thinner. And Robert had the Acme. Okay, and now Alina has messaged and said that she found the Acme Thinner is found 7 times, the turpentine is 2 times, and the mineral spirits and woodcraft lacquer thinner both only happen once. Good, so we're starting to see that there are some connections that we're having here, right? So let's go ahead and take a look at the conclusions based on the gas chromatography results. What are your conclusions? Good. So Alina, you started writing your conclusions. So what are our thoughts? What else are we thinking here? Right? Go ahead and so Alina shared her thoughts. What are your guys' conclusions, Courtney and Caroline?
Do you want to hear like what I think like for the whole crime?
Let's specify it on the gas chromatography, and then we can add to it.
Oh, okay. So the floor debris, the samples from the floor were mostly the Acme lacquer thinner, which means that was probably used as an accelerant. And James Brown had it on his hand, so he could be suspect. Robert Brown, even though his alibi isn't that great, didn't have the lacquer thinner on his hands. He had turpentine on his hands. So he was probably doing something else. So
good, great. And then any other thoughts before we move into the next couple parts? Great. All right, let's go into how the victims died. So locate the notes from the medical examiner in the evidence pack. Blood samples were taken from each victim found in the fire. The samples were analyzed for the percentage of carboxyhemoglobin. Carboxyhemoglobin is hemoglobin that contains carbon monoxide instead of oxygen. Carboxyhemoglobin is fatal at levels greater than 50%. Look at the results from the medical examiner. Did the victims die of carbon monoxide inhalation? And then write your thoughts below. And the second one is going to be study the other notes from the medical examiner. Write your conclusions about when each victim died relative to the beginning of the fire. Note any conclusions about the cause of death for each victim. So let's take a look at our evidence pack. I think that was the second part here. So here are the autopsy results. So looking at these, and then let me just make sure that I'm not missing something below here really quickly. I didn't want to. Okay, so let's take a look at our autopsy results. So our male versus female victims. So let's answer number one. Look at the results. Did the victims die of carbon monoxide inhalation? Write your thoughts below. So taking a look at this, which one, if any, died from what, right? So we've got carboxyhemoglobin levels. Remember that 0 to 5% is normal, and then anything greater is fatal. Was there any burns in airways? Were there soot in airways? And was there damage to the skull? So what are our thoughts? Answering that first question. His wife died during the fire. That is horrible. I know, it's like probably, oh my God, that and drowning, I swear, are like my two scariest things. Don't need to think about it. Okay. Good. And then study the other notes from the medical examiner. Write your conclusions about when each victim died relative to the beginning of the fire. Note any conclusions about the cause of death for each victim. So taking a look at the rest of those notes, looking at the burns in the mouth, looking at the soot in their soot in their lungs. What do we think happened? And then analyze your results. So first of all, who died from what? Did both of them die from smoke inhalation? Did one of them, not the other? Did neither? What did we think? Yes, Courtney. Yep, the male has a broken skull, right? They also found something, right? All right, good. So only his wife died from smoke inhalation, and Caroline said the husband did not die in the fire. Good. Good conclusions. What else? So when did they die? So if Caroline, the husband, did not die in the fire, when did he die in relation to the beginning of the fire? He died before. Okay. All right. We're making some conclusions. Good. Great. So let's go ahead and move into the analysis. So what do we think happened? Where did the fire originate? Was the fire caused by an accident? Or both victims killed by the fire? Is this incident a case of arson? If so, can you identify a person of interest? And so we are getting to that 11 o'clock mark. It is actually past 11 o'clock. So I am going to go ahead and leave you guys to analyze the notes and the observations that we took to create your own conclusions. All right. So I want you guys to take some of the information that we did and then answer those questions on your own. I am here to help if you need anything. My help sessions are available, and my small groups are available as well. So But I am going to leave you here. That is what I have for you this wonderful, beautiful Tuesday. Do we have any questions? Any questions at all? My favorite color is green.